Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. Today's guest is a good buddy of mine. He was on a couple months back, and he's going to be probably somebody I have on a few times a year. He's one of the smartest guys I know, and he's one of the most well-read people I know. And before I started this podcast, we would just talk for hours. And we would say like, hey, whenever I start this podcast, we're going to just move these conversations to a, audio and video recorded format. Right. And, over the years, we've talked about literally everything under the sun, economy, racism, the history of human development, just all different types of things, and human biology, human psychology. And we talk a lot about those things on today's episode. We talk about privilege, and we talk about capitalism, and we talk about insecurities and things that we should be, again, having more conversations about in life. I mean, these are important conversations to have. These are conversations that ultimately I feel will educate us and make us more knowledgeable about the world and humanity and society. So it gets kind of deep. If you like that sort of shit, this is the perfect episode for you. If you don't, that's okay. But hey, that's one of the great things about having your own show. I always enjoy these types of deep convos. And the right person for me is going to enjoy them as well. So enjoy.
This is Openly Outspoken with Jeremy Adams, where differing opinions are not only accepted, they're encouraged.
All right, Jay, we're live.
All right, Jay.
I'm not just giving myself a nickname, calling myself Jay either. I'm referring to you, Jay. Is that how your name's actually spelled? Is that what your parents named you?
Jason. Well, one of them did. That was Linda.
I should know it's Jason because we got that citation together in St. Pete. I should know that.
So what was that for? So, I don't know if the audience knows.
No, we talked about that on the last episode.
Watch episode 21, I think I'm on.
I thought you were before that.
I checked because I got questions for you. I'm curious what you learned in the last couple episodes, because you have some pretty extraordinary people on.
Yeah, for those that didn't listen, we were having some fun on 4th of July. We took these jet skis out, and cops are really strict on 4th of July, we learned, and we got pulled over and got tickets for multiple different things, including not wearing life jackets properly and going too fast in a no wake. So, but we made it out alive, and I think it cost a couple $100 in tickets. So we supported the city of St. Pete. I'll look at that as a donation.
Well, I'd like to clarify, you never asked for money. You just took care of it. So that, that's who you are. I'll brag for you. Jeremy's that kind of friend.
Well, you came down.
And I didn't offer, so I'm thinking, I got to reflect on that.
You're kind of an old school guy, so I feel like I would have had to get a mailed check, and just by the time I went to the bank and cashed it, it just wouldn't have been worth it. I was just I'll just take care of it so I can get this off my to-do. But
do you think that's part of your entrepreneurial focus with time? Because you're one of the most strict people with your time that I know.
Yeah, that's a good question. Probably. I'm extremely strict with my time. I mean, people that don't know me, I obviously don't know what you know and people that are closer to me in regards to this, but I have my food delivered. I have my house cleaned. I have my massage therapist come to my apartment. I don't have a car now anymore, at least for now, because I like taking an Uber and just like getting stuff done. I feel like I could be more efficient riding in the back of an Uber than driving a car. But I did just put a deposit on a Ford Bronco. I'm going to hopefully get that later this year in 2021 because I have been missing having a car. So if it's a hobby or I get joy out of it, I rationalize the time and I'll do as much stuff. So I miss cruising. I miss just driving and going back to my hometown here or there. But anything like cooking, cleaning, things that I just get zero joy out of, driving in traffic in the city, I just try to remove from my life. Yeah.
Did you find that you ended up investing the same amount in travel as if you were to have a car, or is it less with the Uber or more with the Uber prior to COVID?
Well, much less. I mean, my Tesla was ridiculously expensive, right? So
well, yeah, you had the wing one.
Yeah,
That's
I
like
had a Model X.
one.
So it was a $1,700 a month car payment, which when it's
a mortgage.
I don't recommend $1,700 car payments when it just sits in your garage and you don't really use it like mine was doing. And then it was an additional $400 and change for insurance, right? So it was a lot for a car, even if I use it all the time, but it was really challenging for me to rationalize it because I barely used it. So I probably spend a few $100s a month in Ubers, maybe $400 or $500 on tops if I'm traveling, which I would have had to use spend that money on Ubers anyway. But yeah, it's a fraction of what I was spending. And Ubers are fully deductible, right? I mean, it's legitimate business travel. So it was a good move for me, but I do miss having a car. So I'll still take Ubers probably a lot locally if I'm going to be having a couple drinks or whatever, but I just miss like cruising down the highway with the windows down and blaring music and stuff like that. That I do miss that. So I'm going to use my Bronco for that.
Would you invest in a Tesla again?
Yeah, Tesla hands down was the best car I ever owned, right? It was an amazing piece of machinery. I loved driving it.
Why would you give it that title?
It's
what are the pros?
Tesla just manufactures great cars. I mean, you can tell that how the car is made, that the people behind leading the design of that car just have a lot of passion for their job. How all the different apps and bonuses and Easter eggs and stuff like that. It's I mean, you can tell it's something led by someone with a vision and passion of Elon Musk, because it has that vibe. Like every little detail, every little feeling, very modern. It has a futuristic vibe to it, especially when I got my Model X, right, which was over, I guess, 3-something years ago initially. I mean, it was ahead of its time, the autopilot and stuff. So a lot of cars are kind of adapting some of those technologies now, but it was.
Have you heard of the Tesla network, where you tap in to be able to rent it out like an Uber, the car that they're launching?
I have heard of stuff like that briefly, but I don't know. I saw the Bronco and just thought it wasn't really an investment per se from a like rational investment standpoint. It was this looks fun, and I think a Bronco looks kind of cool, and it uses some gas, so it'll be different. I haven't had a gas powered car in a long time, but it'll be fun. So I'm looking forward to getting it. Was your choice
to go back gas partly? Could it be partly subconsciously a reaction to the polarized culture we have today and the radical progressive nature of climate change? You're rebelling in a sense, like I'm going gas. What do you think? Or is that completely
subconsciously? Maybe. What I really did was I was looking at getting a Jeep, and the thing with Jeeps is they look kind of cool when they're lifted, and they're just not comfortable, right? I don't know if you ever rode in a lifted Jeep.
A Wrangler?
Yeah, the Wrangler's a lifted Wrangler. They're just not comfortable.
We just rented one when we were in Vegas. Was it
lifted or normal?
Like when I got in the car, I had to lift my leg higher than normal. I don't know if that defines lifted in the context of what you're talking about.
The actual but
I'm an awkward individual.
The wheels were bigger with like a lifted suspension. So you know what I'm talking about? Like a lifted Jeep.
I could envision that.
Maybe that's a southern thing. You're up north. Maybe people don't have that where you're from. I don't know.
Hey, brother. Sorry about that. Somehow I was getting a phone call. I felt
put your shit on do not disturb.
So this is the thing. It is, and it is 24/7. I guess this is a phenomenal example of my question to you about time. My phone's on do not disturb 24/7, 365. I don't react to anything. I'm not sure. It might have been the iPad though. That's another conversation.
So
people that are listening, if they haven't heard the first episode, they may be thinking that I sell Tesla, but I do not. I'm just a fan of the company and also curious about it. And then Jeremy was my first experience in a Tesla and in the X. And that was a couple years ago. It's a pretty extraordinary machine. I was surprised when I heard you got rid of it.
Is that when you came down and stayed at my old house in Orlando?
Yep, but we didn't get a ticket. We got the ticket on the jet skis.
Which is wild because I drove that Tesla pretty fast. I feel maybe that was my white privilege. The cop just saw I was a white guy driving the Tesla and he's like...
Do you think...
He's like, no
I'm
ticket
not
for him.
being facetious. Our white privilege led to us only paying for, or rather you, because you paid the ticket, $350 for the ticket. What level of white privilege did we or did we not have, being that we did pay the money, but we weren't, I'm not being sarcastic.
For our infractions
I'm curious
on the
what you're thinking, because you just recently had an episode
on the jet skis.
You just had an episode with someone on this, and I didn't watch it yet. So I'd like to know what you think.
No, I mean, we didn't like speeding tickets are around that price. Like, I don't know, like we weren't going that fast. I think we had slowed down a little bit in a no wake, but we were definitely going faster than the 5 miles an hour. I don't think whatever it was, 200 and change, 300 and change. I feel like that was norm.
Being that we're white, my question would be, can we even question our white privilege? And I'm wondering if anyone could potentially be offended by me even asking this question.
So you're saying, would they have...
go ahead.
Would they have treated us differently or given us different tickets if we weren't white, is basically what you're asking.
What do you think, based on the amount of research that you've been putting in over the last year, interviewing people? You just had a podcast with someone that I didn't watch it yet, but I observed it, and they were black. So now, is that too much to say? Now, am I not allowed to say that? I'm not sure. Did you have them on because they were black? Is that racist? So I'd like to know what you've learned and what you think. And if we actually, without our own awareness of the culture, were taking advantage of the systemic racism by driving quickly or speedily and then paying the ticket. And I'm not being sarcastic, although it is uncomfortable to ask these questions.
I don't think it's that uncomfortable. I mean, I don't know. Was one of the police officers, because there was 3 police officers, I believe, that pulled us over on the boat, right? It was 3 police officers?
Yeah. I think there was a woman.
It was one woman for sure. Were they all white? I can't remember.
We don't actually, I don't know. I can't tell you if it was a woman, because I don't know what they identify with. And I didn't ask them. And so I don't want to presume and actually label this individual. Now, see, why is that funny, Jeremy? What is funny about that?
I mean,
because I'm actually laughing too.
You're smiling and laughing too.
What's this comedy reveal? Does it reveal truths of a culture that we may or may not be able to talk about? What does it tell you about a culture when you can't make jokes?
There's nothing we can't talk about right now. I mean, that's literally why I started this show.
Of course. I'm talking the context of, our great nation of individuality and the classical liberal ideal that we could have open.
That's an irony about the term liberal too, is because liberal at its core is actually a classic liberal is kind of what a libertarian / moderate conservative is today. Like a classical liberal is I'm for free speech, I'm for low taxation. Now liberal just has like a whole new meaning. That's what I was talking about with LaShawn last week, is that the word racism has evolved. I found the definition in when the word was created in 1989 in the Oxford Dictionary. I believe this is what it was. If there was another version before this, then I'm sorry. I'm not an expert on that particular word. But when that word was initially in the Oxford Dictionary in 89, it was about thinking that your race is superior to another race. Okay, that was the first form of racism. My race, I believe, is superior to another race. Now, the modern version of racism is basically any type of prejudice or prejudging based on somebody's ethnicity or skin color, which I asked LaShawn, I was like, that means literally anything could be racist. If I assume that, I can't remember the exact details giving, but I, have dated a handful of Hispanic women in my life. And if I just, assume they make, these Hispanic women's families make great tacos or something, that by the modern definition is racist. Any prejudging based on someone's ethnicity or skin color now is racist. So like, we're all guilty of that in ways. And I'm not, to be clear, I'm not a proponent of hate speech or being mean to somebody based on the color of their skin. But if you look at somebody's color of their skin, I think we can, there's a lot of just like natural assumptions made, whether it's good or bad. Like it could be good. Like I dated a lot of Hispanic women. Honestly, I thought they were more exciting, more fiery. That by definition in 2021 is racism, right? So any judging, I don't know, she may be really boring and dull, but me assuming she's excited.
What do you think of that? Do you think that's productive? Do you think that's destructive? Do you think it's neutral? What are you from what you're asserting?
I think it's denying human nature. We judging people before we know them or know much about them is a form of, it's a survival mechanism. If you see somebody you don't know, you've never seen before, and obviously we're in modern civilization where hopefully they're not just going to see you and slit your throat or something. It's very unlikely that's going to happen. But a few thousand, 10,000 plus years ago, when you're seeing people of a different tribe or that look different than you or that speak different languages than you, villages were like, that was property. I mean, villages were destroyed, people were killed, women were raped. Like that was just part of society tens of thousands of years ago. And I feel we've, part of our evolution is being able to look at somebody and say, hey, is this a safe situation? And you look down an alley, there's just some shady looking characters, whatever they one of them has a gun. It's like, okay, maybe that's not a good alley to go down, right? It's just you're able to, and I think this is what I've talked to my therapist about, right? People that don't admit that they have certain thoughts are just lying. Everybody has thoughts and assumptions based on tons of people that they see. A lot of left-leaning people see somebody with a red Make America Great Again hat and make a lot of assumptions before they know anything about that person, right? Racist, white supremacist, just every title, selfish, just everything that is thrown at, standard things that I hear about people wearing MAGA hats. I think the area for growth is I see somebody and I make some sort of prejudging, good or bad, right? But if it's bad, I think I slow down. Okay, I'm having these potential bad thoughts. This is not who I want to be in this earth. I have no evidence to support these thoughts. This is just kind of a subconscious feelings that come up. This is not the kind of thoughts I want to continue to have. And just self-correct and just be the best person you can be in the moment, but to just for everybody to pretend like they don't have negative thoughts about people, like whether it's skin color, class, height, weight, hair. I mean, we judge color of their hats, type of car they drive. I mean, we're some judgmental motherfuckers. What do you think about that, Jay?
Have you interacted with anyone that you believed had a strong case arguing against what you're saying and was able to really stand their ground? And then I guess my second question to that, or as a preface to that, have you attempted to do that? Maybe they're just tied together, the same question. Have you interacted, like the conversation you had the last episode, this individual that you interacted with, did you find you generally agreed? I'm going to say his name, LaShawn. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Did you find that you agreed at the core of the argument about the conversation, or were there big gulfs of disagreement? I'll start with that. I'm curious about that.
I would say we agreed on facts, and so that's important. Where I think
what would you define a fact by?
Data. So you can't argue data.
In what context? What was the data on that?
So an example was, and I've shared, and I was just with LaShawn. We watched the Bucks game Sunday. You know, great guy. We play a lot of Xbox together. I mean, we agree and align a lot in life. You know, morally, goals for ourselves and family. We agree on a lot in life. I would say what we probably disagree on, and disagree may not even be the best word. It's just maybe because two people can be right. I mean, that's the thing we have to learn about perspective. We have just different perspective and a different lens of viewing the certain topics, right? Like in his, like he truly believes, and he has had some bad experiences with cops. So although I don't feel the same way about police officers, I can understand why he feels that way, right? Which is really important, and which is part of what we talked about. He believes like cops would be like the last person or people he would call if something was happening to him, because he just doesn't think they're oftentimes gonna look for his best interest. He doesn't think cops are on his side. And
what's his reasoning?
He's had some bad experiences with cops. He's been guns have been pulled out on him. He shared he has had a situation where they were, you know, very physical with him. So because of that, which you and me obviously probably both agree that that's very disgusting, and he shouldn't be having guns pulled out on him if there was no reasonable cause. And if that's truly the case, then there's definitely some.
Well, who's the judge and jury on? I agree, of course, with your sentiment. The question would be, who's the judge and jury on that? Is it like who gets to decide that, you know? Well, like I don't know if the woman on that boat identifies as a woman. I'm actually just projecting that.
We don't know. And so basically what I was telling, like my point of view was, if you look at data, there's about 1,000 people a year killed by police officers, give or take. About 50 of them are unarmed, which you can, if you're going to look for racism in a police department and just people getting killed by police, it's hard to argue of the 950 of the 1,000 that are killed were classified as armed, right? So if you have a gun in your hand, no matter what color you are, a cop's going to shoot you. So 950, they were considered armed. About 50 of people, at least the last few years, and this was a Wash Post stat, so a left-leaning organization. So they're obviously, if anything, they're going to make it seem more in favor of the black community, not in favor of police, based on everything that's going on. About 50 people total a year are killed that are unarmed, and like a third of them were black, give or take. I don't know, 15 or something along these lines. But roughly 50 people unarmed. a third of them are black. So disproportionately black, yes.
Well, a third, that's 1/3.
For a population of that's roughly 12%. So yeah, it's disproportionate. But the more important data there is the fact that so about it, like, no, listen.
That fact, that doesn't make any sense. Just because the population is less and there's more, the proportion would be 1/3.
No, that's what I'm saying.
If it was like 9 out of 10.
No, okay. It's disproportionately, whatever the number was, it did have some slight, black people were killed at a slightly higher rate unarmed than non-black, right? So, but the bigger takeaway from that article is there's only 50 unarmed deaths per year in a country of 330 million people. There's hundreds of thousands of black men in prison for drug charges and things like that, nonviolent crimes. So it's like, why, this is, in my opinion, and this has been not that we shouldn't talk about police reform, not that we shouldn't address some of the issues that LaShawn was dealing with. I mean, those are very important topics to discuss. But in my mind, the elephant in the room is drug laws, the drug war, the government spending to put all these people in prison and arrest them. And so I'm like, I feel like it's...
Well, I guess the question is, what are these people doing? And then if we take the original definition of racism, wouldn't it be racist to make it a race issue if the data shows that it's people that are involved in criminal activity, and if the correlation is that those involved in criminal activity come from, becomes a class conversation, like poor rather than white collar. You're talking about street crime versus white collar. Now, actually, I would like to preface or post frame what I'm saying, actually, for context, because I'm interrupting and I'm acting out a contrarian dialectic right now, openly, for this openly outspoken conversation. But I like to state that I actually believe white privilege exists. However, because of my privilege, I don't have the privilege to act out my privilege. So the paradox is a symptom, I believe, of when a culture, it will be wrong for what it argues for, but the limitations that it creates, one of the symptoms would be that language becomes a weapon or a shield, which negates the opportunity for open conflict, which is essentially freedom to share views, which brings us back to where we were going in the conversation of like the negative symptoms of a poor strategy for equality of opportunity and equality for all, and the liberal ideal, the classical liberal ideal, would be where we can't communicate with each other, because rather than, if we go to the definition of racism, thinking that we're better because of our skin color, what about ideological bias where, well, you believe in Trump, or you believe in Bernie, or you believe in Tulsi, or you believe in X, Y, or Z, so you're an idiot. I have no reason to listen to you. You wake up, follow the science, get woke. That seems as though to fit the same type of definition as racism, where one race thinks they're better than another. What about when one ideology thinks that they're better than another and they don't have to listen to the other? And I'm observing everyone's irresponsible here. The right, the left, I haven't seen one person that wasn't reactionary to the opposite of what their belief is. If you watch either news channel, or hey, Ben, we could talk about Ben Shapiro or Dennis Prager or Dave Rubin or all these individuals who are talking about the opportunity to have a voice and not be canceled, culture canceled, but every other word is libtard or radical this, or so. I've said a lot right now, but I just want, like, for the audience, I think, I'm trying to figure it out myself. I'm more interested in how I interact as an individual. Privilege exists. The question is the privilege of a society that has so much leading it to think that those who appear to have less have fundamentally less opportunity? Are we even having the conversations we need to have to make the world better, to be progressive? Or have we just regressed into this muck of tribalism? And so, how do we even start unpacking what I'm saying? I would like the audience to know I'm leaning towards, I'm white privilege. You know what? I'm also long hair privilege and blue eye privilege. And that privilege, I've had men, women, all sorts of people seek opportunity that I've irresponsibly been taken advantage of. I would perceive that. And there's emotional conflicts there that I, like you said, going in a conversation and saying, am I projecting this conversation with this one cop on all, or this one girlfriend on all? Where does my individuality fit in this conversation? Can't we all be right simultaneously? Which kind of speaks to, but I'm interested how we live. Now, if the symptoms of a culture are pulling people away based on their identity, based on their politics, that tells me the culture is headed to a very dangerous place. I don't want to be right if it means I'm a murderer, a self-righteous victor. I don't want to be right if it means that I have to make you feel like less. So, okay, I have a question for you, Jeremy. I've said a bunch. Have you come across, because this was the original question, I'd like to go back there because I can get stuck in all this mud. Have you interviewed someone that was able to poise a really strong case for what the solution is with this conversation right now that comes from a progressive side? And also the same question is for the conservative side. Have you interacted with anyone that was had a really strong case for why what's happening now is working on the right, on the left, like progressive, let's say? I don't even say left. I think that's actually incorrect. As incorrect as saying liberal, giving it the improper definition. If we're using words that don't actually have validity, then we're ignorant. So from the progressive side, have you met anyone that really shook you? Have you even tried? And then on the right, on the conservative, or let's just say conservative side, have you met anyone that had a solution to the problem without just name calling those on the progressive side? That's my two questions. All right, I have a million more.
While I start answering this, do me a favor, get in the center of your screen there. You're shifting left as it's going on.
How do I look?
To your right. To your right. All right. There you go. Yeah. Center. Perfect. I mean, don't break your back. Get comfortable.
Yeah, I'm good.
But we got, for those that are watching video, I want your beautiful face in the middle. Remember we talked about this last time? Anyway. You're the one guy that just can't stay in the center of the screen. You just get so passionate about talking and you just start drifting. But anyway, all right, to answer your question, I would say, more conservative friends than liberal friends. I would say the reason for that is many reasons. The top couple reasons is a lot of people get more conservative with age, right? They don't want to pay as many taxes and they're earning wealth. And a lot of people I've had as mentors or just people I've looked up to or that have helped me in business or whatever are more successful, do pay more taxes, thus wanting to keep more of their money, thus voting and believing in more conservative principles. So I'd say that's a major one. And that's a lot of my conservative views. It's the low taxation. These business owners are creating jobs and investing in local infrastructure and doing all these things, which is like, these guys are taking a lot of financial risk and we should let them do their thing, right? Which is where I'm a big free market capitalism guy in that sense. A lot of those guys, the most successful, not all, but many of the successful people I know kind of just are in their own little bubble and sphere even before kind of like all the craziness went on, because it's very important to protect your energy, as you know, right? And
I don't agree with that.
Well,
but I'm going to be. I'm not going to say anything other than that.
I believe it's.
I'm taking a note on that, so I stop interrupting. Go ahead.
Not to not have outside views come in, but I think that part of being successful is having a specific circle of people that have positive energy and that influence you. And I don't know too many people, or maybe anybody, that has a lot of benefits from being too heavily involved in politics or all this shit going on. I feel like the more news you watch, the more you're involved in chaos. It correlates with you being more stressed, and it probably correlates with lack of success. Because if you're worried about a lot of things that you can't control or that are super chaotic. So I would say, and I'm just bringing that up because, that group of friends, like, discussions will be had. But I think in most topics, in most things, they just kind of want to be left alone and hang out with their families and hang out with their friends. And one way or the other, it's not going to make a big impact either way, whatever the topic is. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's kind of like the conservative libertarian mold that I'm shaping myself into, is that I just want to run my business, hang out with the people I care about, and take care of the people close to me. And that's kind of what's important to me. Outside of that, my more left-leaning friends, these topics come up a lot more in regards to race relations and topics of that nature. And to come back and answer your question, and I don't know why I was sharing what I just shared, but I think that's important. I think where I'm going in my life is just trying to protect my own happiness and energy. Ultimately, I will put a little bit of my time into changing the world, right? And maybe as I get older, that'll be more of my time. But I admire somebody that just focuses on building, getting their own house in order, right? Get your own house in order before you criticize the world. I'm not going to be, I'm not going to lie and say I'm not just focusing on getting my own house in order. That's most of my focus right now. I've had a lot of conversations with people that are left of me, and it's hard to say like what's going on has been positive or negative, because most of the people that I would say are left of me are just moderate Democrats. They're not radical. They're not, and we agree on a lot of the freedom of speech stuff, and a lot of them are okay. Like, hey, you don't see it the exact same way I do. That's fine. As long as you respect my opinion, I respect your opinion. So I think most of the country falls into that bucket. Either I don't care that much because I just want to focus on my family and my community, or I don't necessarily agree with you, but I respect your First Amendment right to say and do what you want, as long as you're not hurting people and shoving it down my throat. I feel the very small percentage of the country, and it's mostly white people, it seems, probably very unhappy, probably don't have their own house in order, again, these are assumptions. I don't have facts that support this, but these are assumptions, are making a lot of problems bigger than they actually are because of, lack of purpose in their own life and true privilege, right? Like when we're not fighting in wars, no one in our generation is real. I mean, not no one. We had the war in the Middle East, but we haven't had anything like World War I or World War II or the Civil War or anything like that. I mean, we have a lot to be grateful for in this country. And so to answer your question, there hasn't been any great arguments that what's going on is a good thing that I've had. But that's because I feel most people in this world, or in this country at least, are pretty moderate on this. I think there's a small percentage of the country that are very, very vocal, that are very passionate about identity type politics, and while everybody else is just trying to live their life, their purpose and their religion is to feel like they're making a difference in the world. And because we've made so much progress, right? We've made unbelievable amount of progress. What's left? We got to change the name of the Cleveland Indians now. We've done all these things. And again, we never we never should look at history and say positives about what we did to the Native Americans, and slavery is obviously atrocious, and the Holocaust was atrocious, and these are all really, really, really bad things that we should do our best to make sure nothing like that ever happens again. But I feel when a lot of the big progress has been made, there's still people that want to feel like they're contributing, that again likely don't have their own house in order in many cases, and you got to find something, right? And
how do you define a house? If someone lives in a room in a house, how relevant is the house relative to the room? What if the business, the conservative voice, well, let's I'm not even going to label that. Let's say the entrepreneur that's focused on themselves, their family, they're contributing in the context of creating jobs, they give to charity.
An entrepreneur,
are they in a house of their own? That are they getting their house in order, or are they getting their room in order? And their room is in a house. What if the house isn't there? And what level of responsibility could that be? Potentially, could that be the same psychology manifesting in a different medium as the individual in the street with the placards whose room is out of order, but they're outside of their room. So both parties are in a room in the same house. One decides to stay in their room. One decides to leave their room and start rehabbing the house. And their ideas that they're using to rehab the house and change the architecture of the house that both parties share, siblings, are coming from outside the house. And the question is, well, those ideas that are manifesting through the sibling that left their room, that's rehabbing the house that both siblings share, one, the entrepreneur, the conservative that's in their room, minding their business in their room, and their sibling who's outside of the room, rehabbing the house. What is that house going to look like? And where are those ideas coming from? Are they deciding that the house isn't perfect? The way to make it perfect is to actually blow up the house while we're in it. My question would be like, when is the time for one of the siblings whose room is perfectly clean and everything is in order, that their parents would say, wow, you have the cleanest, sharpest room. We're proud of you. Now, I don't know who the parents are in this metaphor yet, but when does the one sibling, or is it even a sibling thing? Is it a child and a parent? and that both are actually children, but by way of language, one is a child and one is a parent, based on the phenomena of their psychological interaction with the phenomenal world. Is the parent in the room with their master bedroom that's built and bigger because over time the entrepreneur's been able to, right, in Marxist rhetoric or terminology, the bourgeoisie has a beautiful room and the proletariat is outside of their room, the child across the hall. And by the way, this is not a condescending metaphor as it's evolving, because my argument is that we're all children. As soon as we physically have kids, we become parents by way of language and by way of culture, which feed off of each other. And that it's relevant. It doesn't mean anyway. So we're essentially the same thing in a different form. When does the parent leave the room? Because I'll say it like this factually: Lenin's Bolsheviks started with 6 people. Adolf started with also a small number of human beings.
After his painting career failed, right?
Every business owner I've ever interviewed, and that's my predominant medium for learning other than books, is to interview humans like Jeremy at all different walks of their journey, started with them having a vision to the solution of a problem. Their first cultural employee was their customer, meaning they created an opportunity where money from the customer went in their pocket. They acted out a series of events solving the customer's problem. So the business started with the founder's vision to a solution of a problem, how they orated, related and interrelated with the customer. That customer's money built up. Eventually they had more and more customers. They saved up money. They hired employees. A book we can get into, which you recommended me, The Who, Not How. They kept developing who's on both sides of the equation, the customer and the employees. And their whole company of, just the other day, Bill Dallas, a legend in the mortgage industry, he's got thousands of employees. Well, it started when he was acquired by Finance America, which was acquired in a subcategory of BlackRock. It started when he doubled the company in the last year with his vision to a solution of a problem, and how he did Zooms every day with his team, thousands of people. But it started with how he thought, right? So every company that would make one room cleaner than the other, if we're going to look at the entrepreneur versus the employee, or the employed versus the non-employed and so on, it starts with a vision to a solution of a problem. It starts with that one person that thinks this and says this and does this and connects with people. When the heck? So if that's so, damn, like what level of privilege, what level of privilege do we have, and how long does it last, no matter what our race, color, creed, whatever, until we are in a concentration camp? Like I'm reading right now, The Gulag Archipelago. I just finished volume 1. I'm doing a whole hours and hours long breakdown in a couple weeks about all of them. It's terrifying. Like the people that you're talking about, which I know them too, that they don't believe it's important to have conversations that challenge their beliefs, so much so that they're surrounded by who's who don't question them, and they create the yes man effect, and they're rich and nihilists and don't even know it. Thoreau said the illiterate industrialist. They're the same types of people that you used to mentee under, that you said, this is stupid, let me keep growing. And what led to this podcast, for example. So, and I'm in alignment with that, because I want to help that neuroses. So I'm thinking, shit, I'm reading the literature on the Third Reich. That upper class was ripped out of their homes and put in camps. I'm reading the literature in Russia. Everyone that was a part of society that had their room cleaned was ripped out of it and put in camp. And I'm not blaming those that are everyone that's on this wokeism. Dude, if we blame the people that are trying to help through a way that thinks helps, that shuts down them, and it stops them from being open to opposite beliefs.
No, for sure.
I think everybody's responsible. So Jeremy, my question to you is, when the heck do we leave our room? I don't even think we're in different houses. We're in the same room. Or I'm sorry, we're in different rooms in a house. And by the way, I'm going to give you the credit. You're doing way more than you admitted you were. You're by having the podcast. Listening. You're doing a tremendous amount
my point with that is I just try not to let this consume my life. I invest a little bit of time, and there's a couple podcasts I'll listen to that dive into. My two main shows that I'll listen to weekly are Bill Maher, who leans left, and Ben Shapiro, who's conservative. Those are the two my main sources of news essentially that I get consistently. Obviously, I'll listen to different things here and there in between. I've subscribed to the Breakfast Club. I'll listen to some of that. There's some right-leaning things I'll listen to here and there. But what I listen to consistently is Bill Maher and Ben Shapiro, and on the political level. And I just do my best not to let it consume me, because the more politics and just everything going on from a socioeconomic standpoint, just it's just negative energy in most cases, and there's just it can consume you and bring you down, in my opinion. And that was more my point. It's not that I'm not doing some stuff, but I just try to limit my time and energy investment in that to continue to grow myself and take care of my our team and my business partners and my future family and all that. But the get your house in order, for those that aren't familiar, how I view getting your house in order, and this is what Jordan Peterson, this is a term that he uses a lot. If you're passionate about a cause, there's two main ways that people seem to attempt to make a difference. There's the more common, maybe easier route, I would say, which is protest, speaking up, things like that, which is more common and probably less risky, probably less impactful too. But it's your First Amendment right to protest anything you're passionate about, and if that's what you want to go do, you can do it. What I feel like, what a guy like Elon Musk is doing, hey, I can protest about too many carbon emissions, or I can dedicate my life to a company that is going to change how the world drives vehicles, and we're going to produce less carbon emissions. Right? So it's like the private sector and capitalism is a beautiful thing for anything you're passionate about. If you feel that a certain type of person is getting treated unfairly in the workplace, or if you feel there's a certain segment of the market getting underserved, that means you can do a lot. You can, and I think it's admirable when I see businesses that are women founded, women owned, and a majority of the employees are women, because they want a culture of, maybe it's a fashion line or a skincare line. Probably makes sense to only hire women, because I probably wouldn't be a great fit to give feedback on fashion or skincare, right? So they can empower women. They can pay great wages. They can conduct leadership training. They can generate a profit to then donate to other charities they're passionate about, or start other businesses that can empower and help other causes that they're passionate about, right? And I think I want more of our society to focus on the second option. If you're passionate about something, put your money where your mouth is. Start some organization that's going to make a difference, and that's ultimately what's going to make that difference. That's the getting your house in order. Create income for yourself, create stability for yourself. And the more stability and recognition and popularity, or whatever you're looking to do, you have for yourself, the impact of whatever cause that you're passionate about is going to be much greater than you holding up a sign on the side of the street. And that's kind of JP's argument. He has multiple videos where he talks about that. I completely agree. If climate change is something you're passionate about, if racism is something you're passionate about, I know if you recall when the BLM riots were happening, the Atlanta mayor was like, literally 50% of our businesses downtown are minority owned. Why the fuck are you guys destroying these businesses? Like, I think that's amazing that we're on a point that a major city, Atlanta, is up to 50% of their businesses are minority owned. And though not only are they more minority owned, they're an opportunity to hire more minorities, to serve the marketplace and provide an opportunity for a product or service that me as a white person may not have the understanding on how to properly provide that product or service. So I would like to see a free market capitalism approach to as many problems as we can moving forward. And in something you mentioned too, we have made a tremendous amount of progress. Like, anybody listening, ask yourself, like, is your life better than what your parents had or than your grandparents had? Most people, unless they're like the Rockefellers or their grandparents or something and they didn't inherit any money, are probably going to have a better life than what their parents did. And if we can offer the same for our kids and so on and so forth, that's amazing progress. So I feel it is really important to acknowledge the progress we're making as well.
Is it reactionary or proactive? What do you think?
Which portion specifically?
Someone focusing on themselves. Because the reason I ask that is, what do you say to what is occurring where underlying this political divide is something, well, much more grim. It's a complete division and polarity of philosophy. A lot of people don't believe in the individual. And when I say a lot of people, I'm talking about the giants, the giant intellectuals of the world.
I think they do believe
that the entrepreneurs pull.
They do believe in individuals, because
whether they're aware of it or not.
Entrepreneurship and wealth should not be dirty word or frowned upon. If you can do a lot of good making yourself a lot of money. Like, first of all, some of the nicest, most generous people I've met or I know are some of the wealthiest people I know, and that's not coincidence. Obviously, there are exceptions. There's that guy worth $1 billion that's an asshole or whatever. We know guys like that. But overwhelmingly, some of the wealthiest people I know are extremely nice, extremely generous, because to build wealth, and the Who Not How book, and we can talk about that if you want, talks about this. You have to have an amazing
for entrepreneurs.
You have to have an amazing team. So let's just say you want to, again, what you're passionate about anything.
Did you hear what I said?
What?
It's the anti-racist for entrepreneurs.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I interrupted you, but I'd like to tell you when you're done.
Okay. No,
I did say it. I didn't know if you heard it.
Even building,
and I think that's where the danger lies. Now I'm continuing to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No. All I'm saying, even building even if you don't care about, or you care minimally about your community and people, and you're just like, I want to be as wealthy as possible. And I don't get, which is very rare that an owner of a company doesn't care about his team. But let's just say hypothetically, even if they didn't give a shit about their team, their community, nothing, which again, very rare, but let's just say even if that was the case, even if they didn't give a shit on an emotional level about everybody on their team, they're still going to have to treat them with some level of respect to keep them around, whether it's a business partner, whether it's a team member, whether it's, the community. And when you're building wealth for yourself, you are paying taxes, you're providing jobs, you're investing in new real estate in that market, you're employing people in that building that are then going to spend money on, local businesses. And there's a lot of solutions that can be made with capitalism. And I feel that's one of the reasons why the main reason we've progressed so much as a species, as humans, over the last, few hundred years. I don't feel it's just coincidence that.
Well, have we progressed, or has technology progressed through our ontology, our
technology's progressed,
we don't understand
at the rate it has because of some sort of capitalistic principle. If there's an opportunity to the railroads, if there was an opportunity to earn a lot of money, I don't know if the railroads would have been built, right? Railroads were initially built to transport goods and transport oil and things like that. Like if there wasn't an opportunity to earn a lot of income, I don't know if Amazon exists, right? Like a lot of our greatest technologies are because of course, people wanting to do good for society, but money is a big part of it. You got to be able to get investors excited and get team members excited and get your workers excited. And, it's more than just having one person with a good heart excited. You got to get a whole organization excited to, Henry Ford, great guy, great visionary. I don't know if cars exist, if, he couldn't have made his equivalent of, tens or hundreds of billions of dollars or whatever he built Ford to back in the day. So I think we would have maybe developed technology at some.
So wait, is that gone? Is that gone?
No.
Or has that evolved? That internal drive? If that presupposed the growth technologically through the vessel of capitalism, which I'm in agreement with you. Actually, I'll say capitalism is a medium by which the human medium acts out its internal conflict relative to the external conflicts of the world. Capitalism is there's no lid to the chaos that can be created through the individuals that are interacting with one another.
Yeah.
And that has consequence. So I do think capitalism has worked if we define worked as in our lives are more privileged than our ancestors. However, I don't think we've progressed at all as organisms. I think.
What do you mean by that?
We've actually just. Well, if Henry Ford's innate inner conflicts relative to the external conflicts, meaning he making decisions for right now based on the natural drives, the instincts of his selfish genes, right? You were mentioning the money, the money as an outcome, or that to motivate him and others, and the science shows that, like the dopamine released in our brain when we achieve our goals and we develop status. Well, has that been a constant for hundreds and then thousands of years? If we agree that it has, I'm starting to lean over. Is the Henry Ford of today as an individual organism? Is their biology different? Is their brain different? I'm not saying that word. Neurology different? Is their psychology? Well, that would be dependent on all these factors, genes, antibodies. So if it isn't, if it's a constant, then what if human beings, this is my claim, we haven't changed at all, but we are pushing technology forward, which tricks us to think we've changed, which presupposes the idea of the utopia, which in its definition is not even a place that exists. And I'm saying everyone's to blame because the entrepreneur, who's the unaware leader of the world, in essence, the dictator psychology that decides not to be a criminal, well, that isn't a criminal, I'll say decides and also isn't a criminal and also isn't a dictator, but is, because that's part of the opportunity in a in a free society, I think that we don't understand that we're actually just we're the same that we've always been. And that's one of the arguments, though, of postmodernism, is that we have the ability to constantly evolve, and that's what, like, all these symptoms of infinite genders and all of that come into being, which I think there's truth in, and there's also truth against it. By the way, I believe in free will and determinism have a spiral relationship, that free will is dependent upon awareness, which is reflectory of external conflict related to the internal conflict. So a lot of these we're essentially the thing I'm really interested in is like how we interact with one another openly in conflict, verbally, to replace physical conflict. So anyway, to clarify my assertion is, I don't think we've changed at all. I think the outside world has changed so much. We think we have, and we have these short blips of time and space to act out our internal conflicts, our trauma, per se, based on our genes and environment. And we trick ourselves to think we've evolved. We're better than, and that's the road to hell. Is paved with good intention. Essentially, that's the nihilism of this culture. And those that believe in God, they act out the same contradictions. Excuse me, I'm like throwing up this juice.
Yeah, no, I mean,
I drink less water.
I don't disagree with what you're saying. I mean, humans have been around. I mean, different, I don't know if they'd be called scientists or some human historians, if you've read Sapiens or similar books, estimated maybe about 1 million years, give or take, of some human species. We've been somewhat civilized, maybe the last few thousand years at most. The last few hundred years has been obviously much different than the first 99% of our lives, right? So you have this species that's been evolving for survival for many, many, many generations. And then all of a sudden we start having this thing called money, and your food can be delivered to you, so you're not really hunting, and mating has really turned into something that's pleasure rather than strict reproduction, but we still have habits of just wanting to reproduce. That's why it's like hard to be loyal and monogamous, because it's not something humans really did until land ownership started. So yeah, I agree. I don't think at a subconscious level we've really changed that much, and that's what goes back to the prejudice conversation. I think ultimately everybody's like, we're here at, like, organisms are created and duplicated to survive. I would say our number one purpose as a human is to survive. Number two is to reproduce. Money, I would say, makes us feel more secure for survival, right? So if you have money, I think that's the number one way to have a level of security to survive and thus reproduce, which is, why oftentimes people that identify as women like men with money. Not that they're just selfish, but it's like, hey, if I'm going to have a child, I need to know I'm going to be safe and secure to reproduce, because safety and security is number one reason, number one focus, and reproduction is number two. So yeah, I agree. I don't think we have changed. I think our environment has changed, and we're kind of adapting. But that's why, some sort of prejudice is going to be really deep rooted in people for forever. Who knows what we'll evolve into? But at least many generations. Why would we have this safety mechanism of judging people that we don't know for hundreds and hundreds of generations, again, for survival, because that's our main care as a living being, is to stay alive, to be able to reproduce. prejudice of some sort was installed in us to keep us safe, to just look at something that we don't know and be like, this tiger looks really vicious. Should I walk up or should I walk away? This plant has like pointy leaves. Should I grab that? Or, like we just have to look at things and is it going to kill me or is it going to hurt me? Why would, after a couple of those generations, prejudice just go away when it's something that's been part of our human DNA for hundreds or thousands of generations of new human development, right? So that's where one more thought and I want you to go. Yeah. Okay. That's where the therapy and the self-work comes in, because we shouldn't be ashamed actually, I wouldn't even say shouldn't. We cannot be ashamed of our feelings, because our feelings oftentimes are subconscious. We can't control feelings and thoughts that we have. We need to have a safe environment to say, hey, these are the feelings and thoughts that come up for me, but this is not who I want to be as a person. That's how we start growing out of these prejudices and feelings and thoughts, is by voicing them, sharing them, making it a purpose in our life to say, hey, I'm having these thoughts probably because of my childhood, or probably because of just my unfamiliarity with this type of person or this type of experience, whatever. But I know this is not who I want to continue to represent. Like, we can't control, so it's okay to just we need to be okay with people sharing those thoughts. And thank you for sharing that with me, and thank you for being honest and wanting to grow in that area. And maybe eventually we can start working these things out, like of our kids and their kids and things like that. But prejudice at some level is very, very deep rooted, and racism could stop tomorrow. We could stop looking at the color of skin and judging people, and then we would find something else to judge people on. You know what I mean? Like, you could get rid of, we could stop caring about what religion and what skin color are people tomorrow, and we'll find two new things to judge them on. So anyway, go ahead.
I agree. How do you think the prejudice of a human can be overcome? And I made have you thought it through? And are there any individuals that you followed in your research, in the time that you invest in these conversations, that you believed had a good theory of how it can be?
I don't think we could ever get rid of prejudice on some form. I mean, why we would be making... You have to have a level of prejudice for the alley example I gave. Hey, you want to ride on this helicopter with me? No. And you see like tape on the propellers. Like, I'm looking at that. I'm going to judge before I get on. I'm going to prejudge and say, this doesn't look like the safest helicopter. Like, that's a form of just prejudging. You don't know. Maybe the helicopter had never had an issue, and the duct tape is just a joke that somebody put on it. But it's just like, hey, I don't really know much about this helicopter, but just when I look at it, it just doesn't make me feel right? Like, we're always going to have just some feeling or opinion that comes to mind when we interact with somebody. Again, I think we can work out and say, like, okay, this opinion or feeling was negative, and I do not want to, that's not the person I want to be. That's not who I want to show up as, and continue to be conscious of it, and not saying I shouldn't have those feelings, like, or I'm not going to just like try to suppress them. It's like, maybe I'm having this feeling because of this. There's a lot of deep rooted shit to why we have certain feelings. If we're just honest, I'm not a mental health professional, but I've invested a lot in mental health stuff. I work with therapists. I read a lot of books on this thing, or these sorts of things. If we're honest with our feelings, we look into why we're having those feelings and thoughts, and consciously, tell ourselves and say out loud and tell our friends and family that, this is the person I want to show up as, somebody that gets to know somebody before they have any prejudgments, somebody that cares more about on what's on the inside than on the outside. If you're conscious about doing that and acting that in your life, I think eventually you can start working a lot of those thoughts and feelings out. But we can't just because there's a bunch of people that are telling you shouldn't feel a certain way or shouldn't think a certain way. You're just not going to wake up one morning after 40 years on this planet and be like, you know what? 40 years of patterns, I just woke up and I stopped. Think about therapy, therapists that work with years to try to get through one issue with somebody, like one childhood issue. Like people go to therapists for years to try to work out one issue. Again, how are we expecting people's thoughts and feelings are changed that maybe they were rooted in them from a child, and then that their parents they were rooted in for a child? It's going to take a lot of work and communication from people, uncomfortable communication.
Following that train of logic, then aren't those with privilege that let's say they've created privilege, the entrepreneur, from scratch, born with nothing, quote unquote, self-made, had developed that privilege. Where's the line of demarcation when they're responsible to come into conflict with the person that's 40 years lived a certain way and can't get out of their own way? That's the conversation. What I see is that it's just totally split. No one ever rises. This is the issue I had. That's why I made that assertion about it's not who, it's how. That's a binary that creates purgatory, essentially, in all facets. There's value, of course, in everything. I very much enjoyed the book. Unfortunately, it can't be an either or. That's why I said it's the anti-race of business, because Ibram X has extremely valid, this is a very intelligent individual, and those that follow him as well. And they want the right thing. They want to help people. However, if we can't embrace opposing views, we end up becoming exactly what we hate. The fundamental, so I'll just focus on that book for a second, and I'll go back and make the comparison. I'll bring it back to what you just said, which we are in complete agreement about the importance of being able to speak openly, of course, and have conflict. My question is, I'm going to ask the question and I'll make the point. When does the person, like you said, the people in your circles that have created privilege themselves, following the American pragmatic ideal of hard work, doing the right thing, treating people right, focusing on cleaning their room. We'll talk about Jordan Peterson and his philosophy which is essentially existentialism, and they've done all that. When does that person, what level of responsibility do they have with the person that to them isn't doing the right thing, isn't cleaning their room? If you just said, and I agree with it, they can't see how their strategy isn't working, or maybe they can and they don't know how to help themselves. Not everyone is going to have a therapist. What if we're all therapists? What if that actually reveals the understanding of the individual understanding of their individuality? So when do they actually get out of their privilege and help those that are not privileged relative to their privilege? And this is what I'm saying, is this a fundamental issue in that book that you recommended, which was an awesome book. But there's a blind spot because it creates cultism. When you're looking for who, and say, this is not even that book, this is a plague of our Western culture at every level, resolution. It's like, I'm the 5 people I hang out with the most. Cut the negative people out. Get rid of the haters. Get rid of the negative energy. That is the Antichrist, in the sense of that is the exact what you hate. We're gonna make fun of the anti-racist and the liberals, the liberal tiers, or we're gonna make fun of the fascist, call them fascists, the conservatives, the far right. That is the irony that leads to hell on earth, because the issue with the anti-racist is not, a lot of people on the conservative side say, oh, it's racist. It's a racist idea. because it ends up becoming a no, it's not a racist. That's actually a symptom of what it really is. It's an ideological blind spot. It's ideologically biased, meaning my belief systems that are up here that transcend race are true. There's no truth, because that's part of it. There's no truth, but this is true. Right? There's no such thing as objective truth. There's your truth, and you said it earlier. There's another paradox. There's everyone has a different perspective. There's no truth. Well, if we're going to base on that assumption, that's the proposition that leads to all of the breaks in our actions and our thoughts and ideas that lead to us to become exactly what we hate. Shit, there is truth. We just may not know all of it objectively as a species, because we're babies. We're babies. How do we uncover it? So this is what I'm interested in. Conflict. Verbal conflict. As soon as you cut out those that disagree with you, as soon as you fire that client without the closure of what was wrong that they were doing that you believed, and like in that book, I just fired him. Well, Dan, you acted out that you were the fourth kid. They're the third. You know, your siblings competed. You didn't like that. You were drawn back by it. I'm gonna collaborate. Well, actually, you're not collaborating subconsciously or at some level of unawareness. The very framework of your entire model is built on a competition with what could be. So the collaboration is a hierarchy up and above where you're buying who's. But the very idea that there isn't a how is actually a negation of the very individuality which made you so appealing, because you're a beautiful human being. Obviously, it was clear in who you were, like who the individual. I'm talking about the main inspiration for that text, not the person that wrote it, who's been trained postmodernist psychology, which is essentially everything that we would be against if we are classical liberals. But we have to be able to argue. So I'm asking you this one question.
Yeah, what's the question?
When is someone else's non-privilege relative to my privilege my responsibility to leave my room? Because based on what you just said, I agree with you. If they can't get better without help, they're not going to get better. When is it your responsibility to leave your room? When is it your conservative friends?
All right, I'll answer
They say,
that.
"Oh, I'm only worried about me." I would say, you're actually worried about everybody so much. You're so afraid. You're hiding in your cave.
No. So this is where I would just challenge this mindset. Like, building wealth is a very powerful way to impact many, many people. You're providing a good product or service to probably thousands or millions of people. You're employing hundreds or thousands of people. You're, paying a lot of taxes. You're investing in local infrastructure. You're, you have some sort of leadership and some sort of platform for people to learn and either work their way up in your company or get a better opportunity at another place. Like, I feel it's important to recognize that just building business is doing a lot for the community. Not saying that should be where the stop sign is, but privilege. Can we talk about that word real quick, and then I'll kind of like circle back to answer that question on what I feel is best. You could argue everybody has some level of privilege. So if, like, let's just say you and me, white privilege, right? We're white for people that aren't watching video, but Jay is pretty white and I'm pretty white. We're both of our ancestors are from somewhere in Europe, I'm assuming, even though
I want to add to that. I have blue eye privilege, pleasing personality privilege.
Well, that's where I'm going with this. Okay.
5'11" privilege. Average guy is 5'9".
Yeah, that's true. There's a lot of privileges. So if you, like, where do we draw the line at, like, what privilege is like the best privilege? So, like, maybe we have white privilege, maybe, but in 2021, and LaShawn even agreed last week, I was like, isn't it like cooler to be like, what doesn't being black or a minority give you more opportunity in 2021 because of affirmative action and because of diversity, inspirations in different companies. There's VPs of diversity now and things like that. Like, you could argue that there's a black privilege in 2021. If for schools, which is the affirmative action, for corporate jobs, for corporate donations, even, all the big donations that were as part of the BLM movement from companies all across the board, banks, all types, Amazon, all types of companies were donating to Black Lives Matter. So, wealth is obviously, I think wealth is the biggest one. Access to the type of education, access to the quality of teachers, the type of friends that you have, the quality of food that's in your community, the weather that's in your community. I live in Florida. I have vitamin D privilege. I probably get sick less than you because we have more vitamin D. Vitamin D is really healthy. So I have vitamin D and sun privilege down here in Florida. We could make a list of 1,000 privileges, 1,000,000, if we just sat here and thought of everything that's going on. So I guess, where do we draw the line at?
We don't. There is no line. It's impossible to have a line, because this is the thing. If we're going to have the conversation, this is what upsets me. Because we're not having the conversation in our culture. It's gender and race are the emotional fodder, and it's unfortunate because there's real issues that we actually could create solutions together as human beings to, that are real. Like I said, I will accept white privilege in all of these things. However, once it becomes a weapon or a shield in a conversation, there's no momentum to progress. There's only regress, which is the danger of language. So what I'm saying is, the difference between a culture and a cult is, a culture is transparent. A cult is the opposite of that. Not transparent. What are its motives? This isn't a gender or a race or any of this conversation. It's a class conversation. It's a capitalism versus collectivism conversation. It is class. The growing pains. It's the growing pains of, dude, Adam Smith, who I just started reading. I'm reading Marx too. That's one thing I'm always looking to read both and to try to figure it out. We don't know how to do capitalism. So I think what's happening is solutions to symptoms, not the problem. And what the problem is actually unsolvable because we're the problem. We haven't evolved at all. Technology's evolved. But at least let's have the conversation. This is Politics is the broker of philosophies, perspectives of the world, which are based on the psychologies of individuals, which completely vary based on genes, environment, all sorts of things. It's a stew of all sorts. Politics is the bridge for those, the medium, the brokering of those different points of view. And they're completely, right now today, the philosophies that presuppose this conversation, they're completely opposite. How do we reconcile that? Because something more dangerous than racism is happening. It's ideological. I don't even have a word for it. Yeah, I haven't read about it. I've been thinking about it. It's ideological omnipotence. It's, I believe this, so you have no right to say anything or think anything that isn't what I believe in. All of that is the beginning of some type of totalitarianism. It's like the only way for all of us to be equal is for all of us to have no opportunity.
Yeah.
To be better than any of us. And this is the issue I had with that book, because there's a break. It's postmodern. It doesn't even know it. It doesn't even know it. Competition with an underlying cooperation, and culture teaches us this. Literature and sports and everything, which is why all of it breaking down the way it's breaking down is presupposing some kind of collectivism that I think that's going to lead to really bad places, likely.
It's hard to say who has responsibility to do what, but more of my point is, I can't say, oh, this wealthy person, this privileged person should have responsibility or should do this. Should is a shame word. that I'm doing my best to remove from my personal vocabulary. But they have the power and more influence to do certain things if they chose to. So let's just say you were passionate about truly resolving the issue of race, and you felt the best way to do it was to have conversations with people, which is what I feel the best way to do it. Maybe not everybody feels the best way or feels that way, but that's what I feel. If you have influence, you have some wealth, you have credibility, you could host events to bring people of all races together and have conversations in front of other people and do Q&A. I mean, and if you have wealth and influence to make that stuff happen, you can truly make a difference. And that's just not that protesting doesn't do anything. I think at the very least, protesting, you'll see a bunch of protesters on the street and be like, what are they protesting about? Oh, they're protesting about police brutality, or they want higher wages, or whatever it is. You say, okay, well, I'm talking about it, right? Talking about it. That was the whole thing with the BLM movement. It was just like, we just want to inspire more conversations. So they definitely got people talking about it. If that's the end goal, it worked, because I think everybody in the country was talking about Black Lives Matter at some point. If you have your house in order, you have opportunity, you have wealth, and you're truly trying to solve things, I just think it gives you more options to solve those problems. Maybe protesting is your solution of choice. But when you have that house in order, you have many more options on the table to impact causes in certain situations you're passionate about. So to end it, that's what I feel. It just gives you the opportunity.
What about those that aren't going to be an entrepreneur? Because people aren't. I mean, if I work for you, if you have an employee and you simultaneously don't have an employer.
Yeah, you don't necessarily, you don't have to be an entrepreneur to have your house in the
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, like, you can earn a decent wage and talk about it with your team. You can invite team members. You can create relationships with your bosses or with your company owners to invite them to, hey, if one of my team members was like, hey, Jeremy, this is a cause I'm really passionate about. I know I've been on your team for a while. It would just mean a lot to me if you could, come out and just show up, support. And like, I would be open if it was something someone on my team was passionate about. I mean, getting your house in order, in my mind, isn't just about accumulating wealth. I think that's one portion of it. It's about building trust with other people that have wealth, because that's part of influence. It's about generating knowledge. It's about creating relationships. It's about a lot of different things. So, but you had a few things to talk about. Let's get to your magical list there. But
the first thing on my list was, if I'm not listening, we need more. If I'm listening, we need more time. That's what I called you earlier. See if we could do more. Start sooner. And we were talking about the length of our conversation today. And I said, if I'm listening, we'll need more time. The reason I brought that up was because I've decided to approach this medium where I'm a guest on a medium that is not mine as inception. I've decided, meaning you're the host and I'm the guest, I've decided not to act out what I see in our culture is the natural dictatorial autocratic phenomena where it's the guest throwing up. I'm bringing everything as a guest that I conceive to have been why I'm who I am and what's valuable about me and so on and so forth. I've made a conscious effort to find out what you're thinking as a host. And it's how I've started to intentionally interact on these mediums. So I called you earlier because we had a big, what would be perceivably, I think in our culture, we could agree, a pretty lengthy time block to do this episode of 2 hours. I don't see that as nearly as an ample time to have the conversation we can, because of how much you invest in your worldviews and how much I invest in my worldviews. And then on top of that, I wrote it down. If I'm listening, because this is what I said to you, if I'm listening, we need more time. When I used to be invited to do the podcasts, same thing with speaking. Without my awareness, it was all about me, to the point where I'm completely exhausted after a dialogue, because all I did was express what I think and feel, and that admixture. It was exhausting.
Yeah.
When I started listening, which I don't know what fully what listening is. I'm trying to figure that out. But an interaction, like with others, which I practiced through the Culture Matters podcast, through that format of interview, I gain energy from conversations, as opposed to that exhaustion of being someone that people look to for counsel, advice, influence, whatsoever. So I wanted to acknowledge that isn't something that it's a Jay thing. I think it's something all of us can think about and potentially act out in our interactions as guests on mediums like podcasts, whatever form it's in. I do. We could talk about Clubhouse. I want to talk about Clubhouse.
Do we have to?
I have questions about. Now I really do, because I've got questions. I want to know what you think of that medium, which I think is killing us slowly, or maybe speedily, or rather revealing our cultural suicide. Maybe. Podcasts are more enjoyable as a guest. From my personal experience, the way I'm interacting on them now, as opposed to how I was naturally interacting on them prior to. What are your thoughts of what I'm saying and the experience of having me on in this context versus its opposite or another form? Or in general, what do you think of what I'm saying?
Well, I would say you and me are probably unique in this sense. And I would say this is maybe like all my guests that have been friends. This is basically a normal conversation you and me would have, whether we were recording it or not. I don't think this is any different than the countless conversations we've had over the last few years. So I don't, maybe for other people you don't know as well, or other shows you're having an objective that maybe listening is better for you, but I don't view this as much different than any conversation we've really ever had. It feels kind of the same for me. How does it feel for you, Jay?
Well, what do you think about conceptually, the idea of being like, have you been a guest on people's shows regularly?
Back in the day I was. I don't really care to do too many people's shows. It's just not something I get super excited to do nowadays, but open to the right show. And actually I may eventually, where I'm really busy with our new mastermind launch and a ecom brand launch and stuff right now, so I've been some of the busiest I've been in years lately, but I may actually start after we slow down a little bit there. I may start investing on building my personal brand a little and appearing on shows and getting this show more out there, because I think it's important to spread the message of the show, which is to have conversations and exercise your First Amendment right. And I'm hopeful that we can grow in this area. And again, to kind of, not that I feel like I have to do this because of responsibility. I want to. I feel I can make impact. I feel I can, whether you agree with me on stuff or not, I want to have conversations and empower you to share your voice. Like, I don't know if you know who Tomi Lahren is. Do you know who she is? She's a pretty blonde, young conservative, really smart, really outspoken, really controversial. I actually read her book recently, and I have a new respect for her because, you know, she's a legitimate conservative. Like, she's definitely further right than me on a lot of things. But she talks about how she gets a lot of hate, and a lot of people will come up to her at restaurants, and she said people throw water on her and say mean things. But she said there's been many times where she gave an example of a black mother came up to her in like a restaurant in LA, and she's like, I'll be honest, my initial thought was they're going to say something mean because a lot of black people don't identify as conservative and agree with my viewpoints. But she said, the mother said, I don't agree with what a lot you say, Tomi, but I've shared you as an example with my two daughters on a woman that can, speak up on her opinions. So although she doesn't agree with Tomi politically, the mother shared Tomi Lahren with her two black daughters as well, that this is somebody you can aspire to be from I'm going to share my opinions. I'm not going to hold back because I'm a woman, right? Like, inspiring people to just share how they feel because of and because they may be afraid to share their opinions on race or on the stuff we were talking about with gender identity or whatever the topic is, whatever is controversial to talk about at the time. We should all be able to share our opinions and talk about it and listen to others. And so I know I'm talking about kind of like the plans with my show, but I feel like I can impact people, and that would make me feel good if I could just, like, when Tomi shared that story, I was like, that's kind of a reason why I started my show, is like I've done a lot of self-work to get to the point where I can have adult conversations with people and have confidence to say things even though people aren't gonna maybe like it, or they're gonna be uncomfortable or whatever it is. And it's I couldn't imagine what my life would be like if I went through life fearful to share how I feel. So if I can inspire people to be more open with their feelings and thoughts and emotions on things and have conversations, then that makes me feel good.
What do you think what's the future of the podcast?
I'm going to challenge myself this year. Obviously, the podcast is only about half a year old. So typically when people start a podcast, it's easier to just go with friends and people and I'm learning how to research people better and what I hope interview better. Maybe I'm getting better, maybe I'm not, who knows, but I feel more confident, at least, in my ability to be on these shows now. So I feel I'm at a point where I can start having more people on that I barely know or don't know, as well as people I could completely disagree with, which, by the way, this is one learning experience from this podcast. This is an episode, and it's mid-late 20s. I forget the exact episode number now, but even people going into it, I think I'm going to agree or disagree with on a lot of things. One big takeaway from this show is that I don't feel a lot of us really disagree on too many things. And social media creates this container that makes people feel that we all disagree on so many things. But if you truly talk through issue by issue, or quote unquote disagreement, whatever, I don't think most people are that far off. Obviously, there's extremes on each side. I can't, a pro-communist. If we talk about just like our views on how things should work, it's going to be hard to find a lot of common ground. But there's not too many communists in the United States. Good thing, or at least I feel it's a good thing. Most people agree on a lot of things. LaShawn's like, yeah, I think it's fucked up that a cop pulled his gun out on me. I agree. I mean, I don't think too many people are going to disagree with that, and we should work to address issues like that. And I hope he would say stats like cops are hunting people in the street, and I was like, well, LaShawn, you may feel that way, but the data doesn't support that. What's killing a lot more black men and hurting a lot more families in the black and other minority communities is the drug war, by a long shot, right? So maybe my opinions or like my feelings kind of change his perspective. Like maybe I should tone down on saying the word hunting, and maybe I just like. So I don't know, but we both we agreed on almost everything. Once we talked it through, if you agree, or if you go back and listen to the episode, and that's just been a big learning experience. I'll go into conversations with people thinking like, hey, we're going to disagree on all these things. Potentially. I don't know for sure. But then when we actually talk through, we find a ton of common ground. And I think that's been one of the biggest lessons for me is I thought there would be more harsh debates on things with people. And, maybe it's a combination of my personality and the guest, and that people are just oftentimes good people in their heart. But I think a lot of us humans, especially in America, have a lot more in common than what we're leading on and what we're giving credit to.
What do you think? When is your plan to start interviewing people that you don't know at all?
Yeah, it's starting a little bit more over the next few months. I'm already booked out the next handful of months, and I had an initial list. I mean, I've been fortunate over the years with with my white privilege. I've just worked really hard to build relationships with business owners and executives and just people that I've come in contact with over the years. And by the way, a great way to just have conversations with just about anybody is starting a podcast. I've realized I haven't had, actually I had one person, and looking back at it, they may not have been a good fit anyway. So I'm essentially almost 100% effectiveness on, hey, would you like to come on the podcast? Everybody pretty much just said yes. Now, if I reached out to them without a podcast and was like, hey, you want to do lunch? Maybe half of those people would say yes, or give or take. Hey, you want to hop on a call and just chat? Probably even less than that. So I would say starting your own podcast, I've realized, is also a way to literally have a conversation with almost anyone. Obviously, there's some super, super high profile people that would be a little bit more challenging for me to book. But 99.9% of our population, I would think, would be at least open to entertaining being on the show, if not agree to be on the show. And it's a great medium to be able to connect with just about anyone, regardless of what your intentions are. Obviously, I know you do it with potential partners and people you can work with. Depending on what your goals are, it's just a great way to connect with people and have them open to sharing and talking about what's going on in their life.
Have any opportunities opened up from it?
100%. I mean, after you spend a couple hours with somebody, the relationship dynamic shifts where it's I don't think there's anybody I've done an interview with where if I was in their town or they were in my town, like we wouldn't like grab a drink or grab dinner after that. Like maybe we weren't as close and it would have been kind of like weird to do it. But I feel that once you bring them on the show, you spend a couple hours, you find out about stuff that's going on with them, you have conversations. Like LaShawn even. We've been friends for a couple years. But him coming on the show and talking, like we did for a couple hours, we started playing a little more video games together. It's a way to connect with new people and or strengthen relationships of existing people in your life that you maybe should have a better relationship with.
What do you think of Clubhouse?
I've spent probably about an hour on it total, and I don't love it as much as everybody else seems to love it, because I enjoy doing things like this and listening to podcasts and audiobooks over it. And I already listen to probably 10 or 20 hours a week of Audible and podcast. So I listen to quite a bit in audio. And yeah, there's nothing I've been on Clubhouse that has made me super excited to get back on the app. What about you?
Do you think that it leans more towards people that haven't developed a positive feedback loop from reading books and learning in those mediums? Do you think it attracts people that are less personally developed than they think they are? And this is total opinion. Because you just made that's an interesting assertion. I haven't listened to anything that was more, essentially more appealing than the book you could read. And you said an hour, but you can go in there and pick rooms there's people on there that are supposedly icons. And I mean, they are icons, but supposedly they know something that I don't know. Supposedly they don't pee or shit. They actually are gods on earth.
24 hours a day on Clubhouse. Yeah, I've heard about those people. Probably just shitting on Clubhouse.
There's a little lag. Is that me?
I think it is you, but let's give it a second. Is it better now?
I'll just try to
yeah, I think it's better.
Give you some time to.
So it's hosted.
I want to know your thoughts. Yeah,
it's hosted on my end, so the audio and the final file will be okay as long as it'll be fine. Because I still hear the audio coming through, so we'll be good for anybody listening. Gotta love virtual podcasts, right? That's what I'm gonna get, Jay, is a studio. Maybe I want to buy a house on the water, and part of that is gonna be having like a studio where I can just invite people down to my house, maybe have them crash there for the weekend, and we can record some episodes. I mean, talk about building relationships with people, right? If I was like, hey, Jay, you and Jenna want to come down, spend the weekend in St. Pete, we'll go out on the jet skis again like old times and record a podcast together, like how fucking cool would that be?
Well, yeah, and on that note, so people, if you've thought of sharing your voice to the world, this is not something that I believe is privy to our culture. But the podcast is actually a real Clubhouse, not a room in somebody else's Clubhouse called Clubhouse. It's actually a portal to create your own live seminar that downloads consciousness forever and creates IP you could potentially sell long-term, like Rogan did for 100 million, or short-term, like sponsors. However, it's even better than that, because it's a branding, marketing, and sales tool all wrapped up in one, because the linguistic etymology of sales comes from conversation, because the etymology of conversation is convert. Conversations create the world. So we're in a Gutenberg-esque, printing press revolution-esque era in our world where every single human can have a voice and build a culture through the medium of a podcast. Very easy to get involved into. So any owner of a company that doesn't have a podcast, especially, is missing out at a post-enlightenment opportunity to build your brand, your marketing, and your sales without pressure. I have created an extraordinary organization of organizations just by having interviews with human beings that are extraordinary. And that is available for anyone. We help founders with them. However, only ones that are through other deliverables. So like, I'll use that book, which I like that you recommended, by the way, The Who Not How. I don't like the title and the main premise, but there's some value. There's a lot of value in the book. The idea of buying versus selling, that's how I've created my life, is that idea of buying. Get the book, guys. It's Who Not How. Get it. All books are great. I read everything. I'm a stickler, but I buy. It's all buy. It's like, I'm picking you. You're also picking me. That is the power of the podcast medium. I'm going to be more vocal in 2021 and 2022 and so on about podcasting because of these business development epiphanies that I've had analogous to our culture. So I'd like to add that in for practical utility for anyone listening to this. And of course for you, Jeremy, because you mentioned earlier that you like to build your personality brand. Well, you being a guest is way less efficient than you being the host. You're already building it. Like, you're doing the best thing you can. I'd rather interview and I will interview Joe Rogan before he interviews me. I'd rather have him on. I'm going on yours and a handful of other human beings because that actually is a way for me to not create my own cult where I never have to go out of my own house.
Yeah.
Like, this takes me out of my comfort zone as a mega influencer, someone that influences influencers. I need to get uncomfortable being naked in the square, the public square. So the best way to build a personality brand is counterintuitive to what our culture thinks.
You know, real quick, Jay.
Of course, it's how. So I just want to. It's how you go about doing it, which is really just my message to everybody: is how you interact with other humans reveals who you are, not what you say or think. That's what I think is the solution to all of these ideological, race, gender, ideological, cultural issues. Is how we interact transcends what we look like. King said, judge me not by the color of my skin, but the content of my character. Yeah, take it, even farther than that. How I interact with my perceivable or linguistic enemy reveals my redemption or my purgatory. So I'd say to Tommy Lahren, the feedback loop is, hey, maybe you could be less alienating and you'll get less likely water spilled on you. My advice to Donald would be, maybe you could say fake news less and defend you. So anyway, I'm going down this whole clubhouse.
Well, real quick, I want to share. I just realized we have a similarity amongst ourselves I don't think we've ever discussed.
We have many similarities.
Well, this one is one we've never discussed. We both, I feel, are an influencer of influencers, especially for our, not that we're like super, super young guys, but compared to a lot of the people we have influence over or have close relationships with, I think we're probably on the younger end. I think we've both done an amazing job of building influence amongst influencers, but aren't necessarily like influencers to the masses, right? Maybe we could be influencers to the masses at some point if that's the route we want to take. But I never realized that we have that thing in common. We both are influencers to influencers, which is extremely powerful. And that you have to be a different person to be an influencer to an influencer than to be an influencer to the masses. That's a different, because you're going to...
Well, I think the order matters. The order matters.
Yeah.
If our generation was more open to helping our elders first, rather than getting fame, I draw the analogy to like Satan and God. And that, if you're going to take it just as a metaphor, Satan, the accuser, I want to be you. What does the youth want to be? Ahead. So the mentee ends up not learning from the mentor what they could have consciously, but resents the mentor, attempts to kill the mentor. I would say businesses are founded out of that conflict. At some point, there's a break between a mentee and a mentor that splits, and the hero's journey is born out of the phoenix starts rising.
Yeah. What do you think about us? What are some common traits in both of us that allows us to influence influencers? Because I know some of the people you work with and have relationships with, and some people I have relationships with, we don't make it like public, or
that's one of the main ones. That's my first answer to your question. That right there, that's a sign of maturity. Those who have need not say. That's why I don't lead with what I've accomplished or what I do or who I work with. I'm against that.
Sign of insecurity, right?
And I am very insecure. That is part of being an honest liar. Honest in public, but lying to myself, which is what I think human beings are. In the epitome of what we are is that we are honest liars. I am insecure. The question is, how do I use my insecurity? This force that Henry Ford had, that Joan of Arc had, that Tubman and Cleopatra and Alexander the Great and everyone had, all of us. How do I use it? So, number one, I cut you off, but I would like you to keep going. But that's very important. I'm focused on the how. I'm not teasing that. I understand what they mean, but the binary is dangerous. I'm so focused on unlearning. It doesn't mean I'm not gonna bring who's, but it's not either or. It's very important to me because I don't want to become a hypocrite, and that's self-righteous. So number one, I don't lead with who, what I have, all these things. And my mother is very proud of me. My adopted mother, who's my mother, I call her mother, Barbara, she is very proud of me because I have created what would be labeled as success, as a, have not finished high school, no GED, poor background. And we've done extremely, extremely well. In all aspects, what anyone would label, any statistic.
Do you are you happy with your success?
That has to.
Are you
beyond? It's not even. I am very blessed. I
would
do
you consider yourself successful?
Yes, especially, and I would even go farther to say that the definition. So that book, I'll go back to that book, Dean's Assumptions, the 10 assumptions that he bases his theory on, and he was a inspirer to Dan of that book, and those assumptions have an inner contradiction that would lead to that are presupposed by nihilism or meaninglessness, where the individual is attached to the external world. So detachment and attachment are the same thing in a different form. I don't have that because I focus on conflict. I focus on being honest with people that I don't like. I focus on working through my prejudices, and I focus on involving myself in the relationships that I have deeply in all aspects, my enemies, my friends, our client partners, and so on. That is a meaningful existence. The reward for that very deep work has been extremely fruitful by any stretch of the imagination. And that's what I would say. How I define success would be very different. But if we were to look at success as the cultural symptom of a capitalistic free market society, I would say, based on, especially because of my age, I'm in it. Where we're at is analogous to the gifts that I was born with in that percentage.
Yeah.
So the answer is yes, deeply yes. Like, wow, that's extraordinary. In all those aspects, and that's a never-ending thing. So much so. But the number one is this: and of course, my work is very is heterodox to the culture of business. which different episode. Number one, you don't sell who you work with. You teach what you know. And if you don't know anything, like this idea that people are imposter syndrome, well, because they are. You are an imposter. The question is, to what degree? Because there's an external imposter of like what I know, and there's who I am and how authentic I've been in my interactions with others relative to how honest I've been with the world about myself. What is myself? Well, it's a constant evolution of what has happened, what is happening, what can happen, and so on and so forth. But I think the start of working with extremely developed human beings, which I think is the foundation of an actual business. At some point, you're going to start a business with no resources, no network, no connections, and likely know-how. So you know, anyone listening, you know something that someone else doesn't know is what you think. Maybe your competition in your industry, and you go out there and you sell it and you make it happen. And that's the foundation for what I would say is an empirical business. It's not just what you could do that other people buy into, and then they now teach what could happen. This is what I actually do. That's how we approach our work. Culture advisor, production, podcasting, so on, behind the scenes in organizations, in a plethora of industries. That's the first thing. Don't focus on who you're working with and selling that to the world. Teach what you know. Well, if you don't know anything, well, then you look at your life. What are you doing? Right? I spend a tremendous amount of time doing what I teach: reading, writing, listening, sharing information.
Let me say something that's super important on this topic. Yeah. So
I wish we had more time. So
it has to do with. I'm going to make a weird connection to dating profiles right here, but there's a lot of overlap. So if the woman, I'll use a woman for example, because I have friends that are like, I interviewed one of my first episodes, but are different types of dating consultants and stuff. And I've talked with them about this. If your main Bumble profile picture is you in a bikini, oftentimes that's because you subconsciously feel that that's the best, your body is the best value you bring to a relationship. If you're meeting somebody and the first thing you start talking about is people you've worked with or successes you've had, that's because subconsciously you probably believe that who you've worked with is the most important, incredible thing about you. It's some doubt in like who you are as a person, what you can bring, just you yourself, to be able to have to like, hey, like this is something I'm going to bring into the equation to add credibility, in quotation marks, right? Because some people may think it's credible. Some people may look at them like they're being stupid and they're insecure because they're bringing up random names that they work with and I just met you. And in the men, the same thing. So I don't mean to just like stereotype women here. If the guy's like is shirtless picture in a mirror, it's like, hey, my physical body is the best thing I bring, which maybe is okay in certain cases, but it shows some level of doubt or insecurity in like who they are as a person, just as a person themselves, regardless of who they work with and who they have relationships with. And to be quite frank and transparent, like there are times, and I know when I'm doing it, and it's rare, but it does still happen. Like I feel like something like this has happened in the last month. But I'll feel the need to say somebody I've worked with, or maybe I'll even drop like revenue we're doing or something, just because I feel like I need to do it to impress somebody or gain approval. So I'm not perfect at this either.
Well, just to clarify, there is a part in any sales process. If sales breaks down a conversation between a potential problem solver and a potential medium of a solved problem, which would be a customer, where the potential problem solver, which would be the business or the employee, which is an extension of the business, would show proof. Hey, this is who we've worked with. This is what we've done. So there's a decision that would be made. There is a certain part in the process of a conversation.
In a sales cycle,
by the way, well, so at some point,
yeah. So
now, because if someone doesn't ask who you worked with, that could be a red flag in its own right, depending on the context.
I don't even mean from a sales yes, in sales.
Oh, you're talking about a personal,
in life in general. Oh, hey Jay, I met you. You know how when you're you meet somebody at a business event or something. Hey Jay, what's up, man? What do you do? Oh yeah, I work. I've had people literally the first thing they say to me, "Hi, I'm Jay, and I work with company A, B, and C." Okay, that's cool. What are you passionate about in life? Oh, well, it's more of, obviously at some point in the sales cycle, it makes sense to share the brands you've worked with, on our company website.
Since we're here,
yeah.
Well, I would like to end on this. I think that's the fundamental linchpin that attracts people to Clubhouse and commoditizes all their values simultaneously. Clubhouse actually, and I'm not saying that opportunity is definitely, depending on how we use mediums, reveals us. So lots of opportunity in all mediums. However, that medium is built around, the product is the influencer, not the people looking for help, looking for connections. The product is the influencer, because every influencer has those they influence and those they are influenced by. The natural symptoms of success externally are a neurotic pride, a false sense of meaning, which is the fundamental flaw in how capitalism is acting out. What this means is that the influencer, the mega, dies having never met their idols, because they're never going to be good enough externally, because they're still a human that pees and poops and loves and F's. So the Clubhouse application is perfectly down to the, leave quietly, perfectly designed to suck the time of the mega influencer, who's less of an influencer relative to their idol, while they're the mega relative to those they influence, to suck their time and make them free psychologically. So you'll see people spending, they actually now technically are the cultural employees of Clubhouse, not entrepreneurs that own these giant companies. From a sociological perspective, they are the salespeople of the medium. And now, this doesn't mean that there isn't value for them or the people, but it's very important to understand the difference between proactivity and proactive reactivity. And because we're all liars, or rather honest liars that think everyone's lying when they're really lying to themselves and they believe in something, which is the fundamental issue with the humans, was the fundamental impetus to this polarized culture we have. Essentially, people are just using their time less aptly. I'm interested in all these things curiously as a human being, and therefore I built a business around it where I could live my life curiously endeavoring to learn it. So I asked for money to teach what I'm talking about. So if you ask me if I'm successful, I couldn't imagine another life.
Yeah.
I know if I didn't do this, I would likely I've tried all that other shit.
I ask you if you're successful because there's days that I even have where I'm just like, man, am I even doing that well? Am I Am I as successful as I can be? Like, I still have days or periods.
So I think reading solves that.
Doubt.
I think reading solves that. Both audio and physical, but not alone. Writing helps with that. Not to make a masterpiece. Another thing that helps with that, having a very difficult relationship. It's called a relationship with a spouse. And not running from the relationship, which is what's taught, especially in entrepreneurial circles. It's one of the issues I have with that book. They teach one of the chapters. It was chapter 8, how to be. Damn, I wrote it down. I wanted to get into it. It was like really bad advice, really dangerous advice. No, lean into the conflicts of a relationship. If you have relationships where there's no conflicts, you're actually a dictator, not a relationship person. You're just lying to yourself. The literature is unbelievably. So I'm saying, like, that's what I'm about. Reading to think, writing to develop. I'm not picking on you, by the way. I'm talking generalities, like generalities.
Yeah, I actually agree with that. What you just said about if there's not conflict in a relationship, because the last relationship I had, one of the challenges that we had was that she's like, I feel like there's like not that I even felt there was a lot of conflict, but she's like, I feel like even the conflict we're having, we shouldn't be having. And I was like, so it's, I believe, normal in a relationship. We're talking about each other's opinions and perspectives and getting a better understanding. And I felt every adult conversation we had was productive, but she viewed it as unnecessary conflict. And what you just said, like, really resonated with me, because I thought it was productive. I was like, hey, like, I'm sharing how I feel. You're sharing how you feel. I think both have an understanding of each other's perspectives, or at least a better understanding. And although maybe a little bit of emotions got involved and we maybe were a little meaner than we should have been or whatever, I thought that was very productive. And I couldn't imagine a successful or close relationship without some level of conflict. I mean, I don't know how that would even be possible. So yeah, and I never thought of it from a dictator standpoint, but that means somebody is just leading the relationship. So that's one of the that's why the Marxists exist. I just to clarify, that's why the Marxists exist. Yeah. Carl's trying to solve the symptoms of capitalism. That what I think now we're out of time, but essentially that's what we're doing together, dude. We're starting to have conversations together. What is the next ism? Because Adam Smith didn't do good enough. Carl doesn't have the answers. That thing you sent me to listen to is like Sam Harris, bro. He's talking to a guy whose main influence is Peter Singer and Karl Marx and 7 other guys that all believe in utopia. And I'm sorry, like, I don't agree with the idea that I'm just going to give 10% of my money away without asking questions, because that essentially is the same type of sociological structure as what China would like us to do by having a communist party where everybody can fake like they have capitalism. So anyway, I always love talking to you. We do have great conversations. I have more questions, but we're down to the final minute, and it's your show. Like, yeah, how should we end it? We'll end it
we got to do another.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. We'll just plan to do one a quarter, one every few months, and just kind of catch up on stuff. There's obviously going to be a lot that's happening for the foreseeable future and some of the topics that we discussed. So I'm sure we'll always have plenty to talk about, but it was great having you on. I always appreciate your train of thought and way of thinking, and I always feel like I learned something. So thanks, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for the invite. I just realized I wanted to talk about the gulag. Like, I have like 8 things here on this list.
All right, we'll keep that list for the next time. All right, I promise. We'll go over your entire list, even if it takes. We'll block out the whole day. We need but the idea of the retreat, not a retreat, but a studio. That's people listening to this. They would pay money to fly down and be in a little. You ever see the new Kevin Hart comedy skit where he's got everybody at his house? No.
That's what I could see on Netflix. Anybody listening, check it out. Kevin Hart. I mean, I don't think he's that funny, but
yeah, he's funny.
It was good.
His old stuff was obviously,
but they're all in his house.
Yeah,
they're all in his
smart.
house. They got the masks on.
Yeah, people come to you, but all right, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you all for listening.
Thank you for listening to Openly Outspoken with Jeremy Adams. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player so you get updated when new episodes are live. If you enjoyed this episode, the best way to support is to leave a 5-star review and share the podcast with people in your life that you feel would benefit from these types of discussions. Visit openlyoutspoken.com for additional details on the show. Find out how to connect with Jeremy on social media and learn more information about Jeremy's personal and business life. We'll see you next time.